You know, the definition of serendipitous is when you go to a great winery and you're getting in your car and you notice there's a distillery in the same neighborhood. And that's how we discovered this. I can't believe it.
Yeah. I was really impressed the first time we came into the tasting room.
Yeah.
With the variety of stuff that he produces here.
I know.
In small batches.
Hi, guys.
Hey, welcome.
Hey, Matt.
Good to see you.
Good to see you, man. Give me an elbow.
Hi,
guys.
COVID elbow here.
Good to see you.
Welcome to the shop.
Well, we're very excited. Well, why don't you show us where the magic starts?
Let's take you on back then.
Beautiful copper, beautiful
so obviously
copper.
the first thing that pops out at you when you get in here is the custom-made hybrid pot column still that we had made for us from Vendome Copper and Brass down in Louisville, Kentucky. They custom built this shape for us. We actually sketched out what we wanted to see built for us, and they custom built it for us. So
I've never seen anything quite like it. Tell me about the narrowing cone on the top, and what does that do?
So we did a bit of research as far as still shape and design and how that impacts the finished spirit that you're actually distilling. You know, we did some research and travels out in Scotland.
Oh, you poor man.
Yeah, really hard time. Yeah, so you'll see it's kind of a wide tapered neck design.
Right.
Versus a lot of other stills you might see, especially from this manufacturer, you'll see a column that sits on top,
right,
or a narrower tapered neck design. You know, obviously we're still new to this, and so we're still collecting data. And but you know, based on some of the distillers we visited that we really liked and wanted to emulate some of their practices, this is kind of the still shape that jumped out to us the most.
It's absolutely beautiful. So you put your mash in here, you heat it up to where it'll only vaporize the alcohol. The alcohol vapors go up and start to condense there. And then what does this do?
Yeah, so we've got a few different side components here, which allows us to be a bit flexible as far as what we're producing.
Yeah.
So the pot still portion over here, we use this for producing whiskey. So our whiskey is double pot distilled. We're hoping to release that later this year. Fingers crossed.
I'm hoping you will too, because I got to taste
Us too. It's hard to wait that long.
Yeah.
And then we've got a side column you can see here, and then this stainless chamber here is a gin basket. So that allows us to do higher proof spirits as well as the vapor infusion of botanicals.
Right.
We have a few valves on the back that allow us to adjust the flow of the vapor. So we can either go directly from the pot still, if we're making whiskey, all the way to the far right stainless chamber, which is a condenser.
Okay.
Which is how you condense the high proof ethanol vapor back into a liquid.
Okay.
Or we can direct it into the base of the column if we're looking to further rectify and purify the spirit, as in the case with gin.
Yes.
What are all the windows for?
So each one of those windows represents what's referred to as a plate. And essentially at each one of those different plates, it's a copper plate, and it forces about a ½ inch to an inch thick of liquid distillate to be trapped at each one of those plates. And so the ethanol vapor has to bubble up through each of those different plates, making its way to the very top, which is where we collect the vapor ultimately.
You guys handcraft everything, and this is just another tool in your belt.
Yeah.
It's very cool.
What's this thing up front?
This thing up front is actually a spirit safe. And so this is where all of the finished spirit will travel through. It'll actually flow out of the condenser into this glass tube in there, which is called a parrot. And in that parrot, that's constantly flowing with liquid distillate as we're collecting off the still. The reason that's there is we can actually float a hydrometer in there when it's distilling, so we can read the alcohol proof coming off the still.
Right.
These are actually more commonly used as wine tanks.
Yeah,
so single wall stainless steel, but they work great for storing spirits just because they're neutral and fairly lightweight and affordable. So we use these for holding our spirits. That one's empty right now, but this one actually is holding a blending of 2 different batches of barreled gin that we're hoping to release in a couple of months here.
So well, gin is your specialty.
It is, yeah. So we take a slightly different approach to making our gin. Actually, now that we're over here near our fermentation tanks, this is kind of where the production process for our gin starts.
Okay.
Well,
walk us through it.
Yeah, sure. So we start with an apple base for our gin.
See, I think that is so cool. So you basically make a cider.
We do, yeah. We make a hard cider, and then we distill that into what's essentially an apple eau de vie, and then we redistill it with juniper and other botanicals to make a gin. So more commonly, gin is made from grain. That tends to be the cheapest way to produce it.
Right.
And typically what gin distillers will do is they'll distill it to a neutral strength, like vodka, 190 proof or higher.
Yeah.
So you really take out all of that residual character from the base ingredient, and then you add back in the juniper and the other flavoring additives that make it gin.
Grains of paradise, all that, yeah.
Exactly, yeah. We decided to distill it to a lower strength, so we only distill our gin to about 165 proof. And by doing that, we actually keep a lot of that apple flavor that you create during fermentation. So
and you use local apples, right?
we do, yeah. So all Washington grown, most of it's from
Excellent.
Yakima. It's a pretty fun gin, it definitely captures a lot of that that apple character, a little bit of residual sweetness and some viscosity and texture from the apple distillate, which we really like and find it.
It's subtle, but that's the difference between a great gin and an ordinary gin is subtle.
Yeah.
Excellent.
We also do a vapor infusion, which was the gin basket I mentioned over there.
Yep.
So that we've noticed that tends to carry across more delicate flavors like floral notes and things like that. It's a more modern way of making gin. The more traditional method is to actually put botanicals directly in the liquor in the still.
Infusion.
Yes, yeah, liquid infusion. The vapor infusion, we actually fill that basket over there full of the juniper and the coriander and the rose petal, and then we draw the ethanol vapor through that, and so you get a vapor infusion.
So it almost acts as a flavorful filter almost.
Yeah,
I like it.
Yeah,
Nice.
yeah. And in that gin basket, you do, because it is so densely packed in there, you do get some condensation or reflux that will then drip back into the still, and so that's got essential oils from the botanicals that get back into the pot and then redistilled, and so. We think it's a really nice way to make gin and capture all those botanicals.
Well, I have to agree.
But one thing that's a centerpiece of the distillery here that we haven't talked about is our mash setup.
Yes.
So how we actually extract the sugar from the grain that becomes the base for our whiskey. So we're making a American single malt whiskey, which is 100% malted barley grown within the Northwest. It's
Nice.
Modeled after a traditional Scotch whiskey, although single malt in America has to be called American single malt. And we're doing a few different processes that are different than what they do in Scotland. We're kind of combining practices from the Northwest craft beer movement with traditional single malt production overseas.
This is groundbreaking stuff. I mean, most people just do the industrial process to get that first mash going and then zoom it, but you're basically making good beer and then distilling the good beer.
Yeah.
I love it.
We come from a home brewing beer background. My dad got me into beer early on, so we know beer in and out, and so we just are kind of building on that process. We're making a really good beer. The only difference in our process from making beer is that we're not boiling and we're not making any hop additions. But otherwise, the mashing process is the exact same. We're using specialty grains like you'd commonly see in beer.
Yeah.
Actually, our base recipe for our single malt was built off of a strong Scotch ale that we homebrewed.
Nice.
And loved. So we scaled it up, took the hops out of it, and that was kind of our core recipe.
When you start with something that everyone else considers great and finished, you come up with a product at the end that's just amazing.
And we mill everything on site.
Nice.
And essentially how this process works is this is our mash vessel here. We'll start milling that grain, and that grain will be introduced into the mash tun via this auger overhead. This tank over here is a hot liquor tank. We use that for the steeping water for mashing. So at the same time we're introducing the grain, we're also bringing in that hot water.
It's already at temp, so you don't have that cooking. Okay, I like it.
Exactly. We keep it at a higher temp than we want the mash to be, because once it hits the grain, it's going to cool a bit. And we want that optimal mash temperature once we seal this vessel up to be around 149 to 151 degrees or so.
I imagine using that temperature of water, it allows you to reach where you're going really fast, which means there's less loss of flavor during the process. I like it.
Yeah, so if we walk back here, you'll see we've got a reverse osmosis water filter over here. We use that for the proofing water for our gin. So in the case of our gin, we collect it off the still about 165, 170 proof, which is naturally way too high octane to consume. Although all the flavor's there, it's just too concentrated to be able to taste that. So we'll take that. Let's say this is filled with our finished gin, and then we have a software that determines how much proofing water to add to bring that down to the target proof that we want, which for our gin is 88 proof. So proofing is a pretty simple process. It's really just dilution.
Yeah.
So you're diluting it down to the target consumption.
All right. Well, then once you have it ready, you bottle. Yes?
We do. Yeah, and actually our bottling machine is right over here. So pretty manual. But we'll just take this guy here, No pumps or anything fancy with this. It's just a gravity-fed machine. So we'll take that stainless vessel full of our gin. We'll elevate that on our modified forklifts, and then essentially let that gravity feed into this tank. But everything's very manual. So we've got a couple production tables we'll lay out here.
But you're also taking gentle care of the alcohol so that it doesn't get, I don't know if alcohol gets bruised at these levels, but I think the handcrafting part extends to your bottling line. I like it.
Thank you. Yeah, everything we do is very, very careful, a lot of attention to detail. We're just kind of ramping up our whiskey program and our barrel program here. The majority of these are filled with our American single malt whiskey, which we have 2 different varieties. We have one that's more modeled after a traditional Highland or Speyside malt that does not have any peat influence.
Mm-hmm.
And then we have a second batch that we just started earlier last year that's got heavy peat influence. So we've actually got a combination.
How do you introduce that?
We actually have barley from 2 different sources. We have one that is 100% Washington barley malted, smoked during the malting process.
Okay, that's how you get the peat.
Yes. Yeah. Essentially, when they're drying the malt or killing the malt, the fuel source used to kill the malt is actually peat. That's what they burn.
Yeah, they burn that in Scotland, and that's how you get those wonderful flavors.
So these 2 barrels here, pretty unique process. This is how we make our Amaro Mealy and our ferment. So they are barrel aged. We actually use these barrels as the maceration vessel.
Oh, really?
So what's more common is that you'll see, if you're making an Amaro where you're steeping botanicals in finished spirit, typically you're using a stainless tank like I showed earlier that we store our finished spirits in. We just wanted to add a bit more complexity and character to them. So we're actually using, for the Amaro Mealy, a used bourbon barrel, and for the ferment, a used rye whiskey barrel.
Ooh.
And you can see we've modified the tops of these barrels with basically a marine deck plate. So that
I thought I recognized that.
Yeah, and I can actually open this up for you. What you'll see on those strings are actually tied to nylon bags that are filled with different botanicals. And so basically, kind of looks like we're making a big batch of tea.
Can I tug on one?
Sure, yeah.
Oh, look at that.
If you see on the blue tape there, that'll actually tell you what's in that particular bag there. So you'll see this one's got cacao nibs. We've got bitter orange in here.
This one's got bitter orange.
Yeah. And we've got rhubarb in there as well. So basically, we do a maceration with each individual botanical in a separate bag. And the reason we do that is so that we can actually monitor the maceration. And once that botanical has kind of reached its optimal extraction, then we'll take it out. And so we can take them out individually.
So you can control each component.
Right. Exactly.
So if you put it all in together, it would all get mixed up and you wouldn't be able to control one part or another. I like it. Once again, this shows your extreme attention to detail and control of every process of this. I think that's one of the reasons why we like you so much.
Yeah. Well, it's a fun part of the process too. I mean, when we were developing these recipes for these spirits, we were basically taking small little mason jars and doing small tinctures of each individual botanical, probably 60 to 80 different botanicals. And that was the base for what we used to create the recipes. And then scaling that up and ultimately combining the flavors we liked together to create these unique bitter liqueurs.
Awesome.
So you'll see most of these barrels are the full-size traditional 53-gallon American oak vessels.
Yeah.
This is our lone smaller French oak barrel that houses a batch, the first batch of our brandy. And so what we did is we actually...
That's a forest designate. This is a really good barrel.
Yeah. And we got that really good barrel from our good friends at Eagle Harbor Winery.
I love those guys.
Yeah, they're great. And actually the hooch in there is made from some of their own wine. So we took a batch of their Sauv Blanc wine, distilled that into a brandy.
What was it? Sauvignon Blanc?
Sauvignon Blanc. Yeah. And it's been in there since, mid-2019 or so. We're going to keep it in this French oak barrel for a period of time, and then we're going to transition it to a used bourbon barrel for finishing. So it'll be a pretty unique product. It definitely is,
It'll probably spend, close to 4 years in oak?
3 to 4 years probably,
3 to 4, yeah.
By the time it's done.
Wow. Well, I'm feeling a little parched. Perhaps it's time for the tasting.
I think we can manage, yeah.
All right. What are we going to start with?
So we're going to start off with our original gin. This one right here. So, as I mentioned, our gin, as well as all of our liqueurs, are made from apples. So
yes.
Pretty unique. So I'm going to pour you a sample here. We bottle this at 88 proof. So, kind kind of on the mid-range, maybe the mid-higher range of gin proof. 10 botanicals that get vapor infused into this one. I'm going to pour a sample for us too. But definitely get a strong note of juniper in this one. We use quite a bit of bay leaf, rose petal, orange peel, cubeb berry, which is a pepper from Indonesia.
What is it?
Cubeb, it's C-U-B-E-B.
I've seen that written, but I hadn't.
Yeah, it's a common
Nice.
gin botanical in London dry styles. It kind of has this black pepper spice, almost an essence of clove to it as well. But it looks very much like a black peppercorn.
Oh my goodness, that is beautiful. Absolutely beautiful. That's
It-
martini stuff if I ever saw it.
Oh,
Yeah. We like to call it a sipping gin because it's got
is.
so much flavor to it. You don't really
Exactly.
need to-
It's got a lot.
And the thing is, it's nicely rounded. On the mid palate, it's just fleshed out, but it's not in your face. It's just so delicate. All those little things that you do come together beautifully. That's a beautiful color. Tell us about this.
Yeah, so this is our harvest gin. So every year we're going to release a new batch of the harvest gin. We released the first one back in November of this past year. But essentially this is a unique expression of our original gin. So we took the same gin that you just tried, and then we put it into a used French oak wine barrel from our good friends over at Eagle Harbor Winery. And that barrel previously had Petite Syrah wine in it.
Well, that's a potent wine.
Yeah.
It is, yeah. Very potent, very bold, assertive wine. We left it in that barrel for about 15 months, which is quite a long time, especially for a gin.
Yeah.
So it picked up a lot of that red wine character. As you can see, a lot of color, a lot of spice from the French oak. And then after it came out of the barrel, we infused it with local aronia berries, also known as a chokeberry, but harvested here on the peninsula.
Nice.
And so about half the color came from the berries, the other half came from the barrel. Definitely tastes a lot different than the first gin. So a lot more winter spice with this
Oh
one.
my. What
Almost a
different
kind of a
nose.
cinnamon allspice character to it.
Yep.
Yeah.
You get the cinnamon, the allspice.
You know, you get a little bit of that sweetness on the front end from the berries, but aronia berries aren't really known for being overly sweet. They've got this kind of dry, almost bitter finish to them, which we think works really well in a gin.
Oh, that's beautiful.
Man.
Thank you.
And I tell you, it's dancing in my mouth. I'm trying to figure out what the mid palate flavor is. It's almost a tiny bit astringent or minty almost, but not quite mint. I don't know, but it's delicious.
Thank you.
And I just picked up some rose petal or something on the finish.
Yeah, there is rose petal in the gin.
All right.
Yeah.
I like that.
That's a fun one. Yeah, as I said, every year is going to be a different expression of this harvest gin.
Well, it's a collector's item now. I mean, how much did you produce of the first?
About 340 bottles, and that was
Wow.
it. We're almost out. So after this one, the next batch should come out probably in October or November of this coming year. So,
Perfect for Christmas
And it's
season.
out of one barrel?
Out of one barrel. Yeah, it's one barrel every year.
Nice.
Every year is going to feature a different local infusion of ingredients. So something that you can find locally here on the peninsula. We used aronia berries the first year. We're still trialing and figuring out what we're going to use for this next one.
Number two.
Yeah,
But that's part of the fun.
part of the fun.
That's
Yeah.
the fun.
All right.
Be a one-off experimental.
Makes it very unique.
Oh, I've never had anything quite like that, and my life has been empty before now.
So next in the queue, actually the next three are all varying styles of Amaro. And so for those of you that might not be familiar with Amaro, the word Amaro means bitter in Italian, but it's a bitter herbal liqueur primarily originating in Italy.
And didn't it start out as medicinal? And like many of the great liqueurs of Europe, they started out medicinally, and now they're just plain delicious.
Yeah. Yep. Yeah. Started out as medicinal tonics and things like that, and evolved into more regular potable spirits.
Well, I had a bunch of customers start coming in about 2 years ago from Italy. After spending the summer in Italy, they'd come in and they'd want Amaros to serve with sparkling water and lemon, because that's what everyone was drinking in the cafes.
Yeah.
And there's actually quite a demand for this on the island and in this area, the Pacific Olympic Peninsula. So I'm excited to try this.
Yeah, and there's honestly not a ton of American producers of Amaro. A lot of the lion's share of them are imported from Italy. It is kind of intimidating, going to the liquor store and picking out an Amaro, because there are so many different styles.
Right.
And there's really no parameters for what defines an Amaro, except for the fact that it's bitter and it has some sugar content because it is liqueur. But other than that, there's so many different flavor profiles out there. The style that's typically red in color like this is called aperitivo style, which is more of an aperitif, so something before.
Is it served by itself, or is it with sparkling water, or how
More
do you
commonly,
like it?
the aperitivos are served with something else, like a sparkling water, or you can mix it into classic cocktails like a Negroni or a Boulevardier. things like that. But typically this style is very heavy on the citrus with this really characteristic dry, bitter gentian finish.
Nice.
So in this one, we use fresh grapefruit peel, ginger, gentian root, which is the classic bitterness, bay leaf, bitter orange, and cascade hops.
That color is just stunning.
And the color you're seeing is actually coming from cochineal. And cochineal is an insect that grows on prickly pear cactus, one of the oldest forms of red dye, and how they would traditionally color these spirits. So if you think of spirits like Campari or Aperol, those are probably the two most common brands of an aperitivo Amaro. So it's kind of in a similar style to that, although ours, as you'll be able to tell, is quite a bit higher in proof. It's about 70 proof. Whoa. You get a lot of that bay leaf.
My favorite way to drink it is just club soda and a lime squeeze.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm there. A lot of flavor for drinking this by itself.
Yeah.
And the sweetness to it balances out the bitterness very, very nicely. I think I'm going to have some of that.
Thank you.
Yeah, we tried to, kind of the theme with all of our liqueurs you'll see is they're higher in proof and they're lower in sugar content. And so
Which
that was,
everyone appreciates.
yeah. You can always add sugar to a drink, but you can't always take it out. So
Exactly.
yeah. The sweetening agent in the Rosina is cane sugar, so we use a pure cane sugar. Kind of a nice balancing sweetness to it. The other two liqueurs that we're going to try next are using a local honey. So it's got a bit more viscosity to it. Although the sugar content for these two is a bit lower, you definitely get that more enhanced mouthfeel with the honey coming through as well. But these two styles, so the first one here are Amaro Mili. Mili is actually my mom's maiden name. Also means apples in Italian.
Apples. I like
Very
it.
fortuitous because it's made from apples.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yep.
This style of Amaro, as you can tell, looks a lot different, but it is actually called Rabarbaro style. And Rabarbaro means rhubarb in Italian.
Yeah.
And so it's characterized by Chinese rhubarb root as the main ingredient. So go ahead and give that a smell. That's got definitely a strong, earthy, smoky aroma.
It's pungent and delicious smelling.
Yeah.
Oh
So
yeah.
very different than your garden variety
aromatic
rhubarb.
as can be. I bet that adds. I bet you don't use a lot of that.
Surprisingly, we actually do use a lot of it.
Really?
And it is very forward in this spirit. So you're definitely going to pick up a lot of that kind of earthy smokiness from this one. We also use whole bean coffee, cacao, bitter orange, and then lightly sweetened with honey. And this is the one that you saw in the back that had the strings coming out of it.
Yes.
Yes, as we macerate directly in a bourbon barrel. This one, again, higher proof. This is at about
Thank you, sir.
80 proof. And lower on the sweetness spectrum. So we're sitting at about 8% sugar by weight, which just to give you some
Oh yeah, I can
comparison.
pick up the rhubarb immediately. But of course,
Yeah.
I had a hint. Easy to pick up once I smelled that.
We like to lead people with that, smelling that, because it's a very unique smell.
It is.
Chinese rhubarb is very different than garden variety rhubarb.
That's what I was thinking.
Yeah. Very different aroma.
Yeah, when you said rhubarb, I was thinking the rhubarb in my garden.
Yeah, that's
Oh,
actually the
that's
root.
nice. That just
Stalk is
spreads.
harvested and the root is harvested and dried.
Oh, man.
I get like those old chocolate orange sticks my grandmother used to have in a little box.
Yeah.
Oh, I remember those.
Pick up a little bit of
Yeah.
the orange
Yep.
and the chocolate. In
I love the way it just spreads across the palate, nice and even. Doesn't slap you in the face. Doesn't disappoint at the end. This is beautiful.
Club soda again in this one.
This one, another fun way to drink this is actually in a Black Manhattan, where you can use this Amaro in place of vermouth and bitters. So it's a really simple cocktail to make, but just whiskey and Amaro. So the last one we have here, also a bitter Italian spirit. This is our Fernet. So there is some debate. We've always considered Fernet a style of Amaro. It is a bitter herbal liqueur from Italy. But this one is, so typically Fernets are the most bold and assertive styles of Amaro.
Okay.
They tend to be heavy on the mint and menthol flavor profile. Some include an element of like anise or licorice. Ours does not have that. But because they have that menthol kind of mint character, they tend to be more medicinal. And so as a result, we found that it tends to be the most polarizing style of Amaro, just because it is a very strong flavor, definitely the most bitter expression, and has some of that medicinal character. To get that kind of medicinal eucalyptus menthol, we use black cardamom, which I'll have you smell that before you try this.
I would
because
like that.
Black cardamom is quite a bit different than green cardamom, which is more common.
Oh,
This
look
stuff
at
is
those.
cured over a fire. It's got a lot of smoke to it. It's got this almost campfire.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, it does, but with some kind of mint eucalyptus thing in there too.
Yeah, I can smell eucalyptus.
Nice.
And we use about 10 pounds of that in one of those barrel batches. So it's quite a lot.
That's a lot.
The signature botanical in this one. We combine that with peppermint leaf, bitter aloe, juniper, and it rests in that rye whiskey barrel for about 9 months.
I cannot wait to put this in my mouth.
Yeah. So if you like a spicy rye whiskey, this will be
And I
your
do.
next best friend. Makes a really good Toronto cocktail, which is rye whiskey, ferment, simple syrup, Angostura bitters.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
And the mint,
Yeah.
the eucalyptus.
Yeah, you get that kind of cooling sensation.
I just
in
love
the palate.
that. Well, that's beautiful, and it's still going on. I mean, it hasn't diminished at all, and I've had it in my mouth for at least 5 or 6 seconds. Wow. And the finish brings up a little bit of that smokiness. That's beautiful.
Thank you.
I haven't had any of your stuff that isn't just outstanding. I'm very excited to be here.
Really appreciate it, yeah.
All right. Well,
Well, I do have one more spirit,
that's his.
if we have time to try it.
We always have time to try
All right.
it if it's what I think it is.
This is our special under-the-counter bottle, unlabeled.
The whiskey.
Yes. I'm
Nice.
gonna grab you a couple glasses here. This is a preview of our American single malt whiskey. So as I mentioned, we're hoping to release the first batch of this later this year, ideally, which will be roughly the 2.5 to 3 year mark on the first stuff. Yeah, so curious to hear your thoughts. But this is, still a younger whiskey, but it gives you a sense for the direction that this whiskey is headed as far as flavor profile. We got 4 different malts in there, different expressions of malted barley. We use a distilling yeast targeted for malted barley fermentations. We do a closed top fermentation, and then we do our aging in a combination of new and used barrels.
That closed top makes sure no flavors escape.
Yeah, it's kind of a way to control any ambient
That's
bacteria.
barrel strength too, by the way.
Yes, this is barrel strength, I should mention as well. So 115 proof. So pretty strong, but captures a lot of the flavor profiles we're looking for already. So
It may be young, but it sure is beautiful.
Yeah.
thank you.
It goes
I
down
like
smooth.
that. Oh, especially for high proof.
Yeah. Yeah, we kind of initially thought we'd be bottling our whiskey around 90 proof, something more standard. But if it turns out like this batch here, we might do a barrel strength release.
Oh, that would be really special.
Yeah.
Well, how did you get into this anyway? Is this a family operation?
It is. These are my parents, Jeff and Helen. So the 3 of us founded Highside Distilling and opened up roughly 2 years ago, but it's been kind of a dream of ours for the last 5 to 7 years or so.
I love the way you describe things, the way you teach us about these items, and I understand that you actually do some classes.
We do, yeah. At the onset of the pandemic, we actually decided to take things virtual, and so we do a series of virtual cocktail classes here in the tasting room.
Wow.
Where we'll talk through, tasting notes of our different spirits and how you can use them in practical cocktail applications. So we've done a few of these classes in the past. We're hoping to do more in the future, and ultimately, when it's safer to do so, do some in person as well.
Well, if someone wants to catch one of these virtual classes, how do they do that?
Yeah, so we send out regular notices when they are available for registration through our mailing list. And so you can sign up for the mailing list at our website, www.highsidedistilling.com.
Perfect.
Right at the bottom of the page, there's a link for the mailing list. So you can join it there. Also on Instagram and Facebook at Highside Distilling. We always promote our classes through those channels as well.
Do you have a YouTube channel?
We do, yeah.
Well, people should subscribe to that.
Yeah.
And I would mention maybe Tasting the Peninsula too.
Absolutely.
But, all right. Well, thank you again.
Thank you.